צהריים טובים. מה לך שאת בוכה? את רואה שגשם. איפה אצבעות אלוהים? למה שערים לא נושאים ראשיהם? אבל את רואה שגשם. וכל הרחובות. באין גשם, מה נעשה באין גשם? כאשר יסגור השמש, אשא אותך אל הערים. סלעים גדולים יצננו את עינייך, ואבנים קטנות. מה לך שאתה מרנן, ופעמים לך שאתה מבועל? מה לך שאת בוכה? את רואה שגשם. לצאת היכן השערים, היכן פתחי עולם, עגלי גשם על מחלפות ראשך. מה לך? את רואה שגשם. את השיר הזה כתב מלאכי עוד לפני שאני התחלתי ללמוד באוניברסיטה העברית בירושלים. ואני מצטער, מלאכי, זה קורה לכל אחד שקוראים לו דברים שהוא כתב לפני שנים, אבל אני יכול להבטיח לך שהשיר הזה הוא מאוד יפה. ולא רק שהוא מאוד יפה, אלא שהוא גם משקף לא רק את היכולות שלך כמשורר, אלא גם את הידע שלך במקורות. אני שמח לראות את הקהל הזה. יושבים כאן האנשים הכי טובים שאני מכיר, אנשי המחלקה לכתבי יד של בית הספרים הלאומי והאוניברסיטאי, כפי שקראו לו פעם, ושהקימו מוסד לתלפיות, שאספו את האוספים היקרים האלה, העבריים, הערבים, ובמשך שנים רבות חוקרים יכלו למצוא שם את כל מה שהם ביקשו, שלא לדבר על המכון לתצלומי כתבי יד, ואני רואה גם כאן נציגים של אותה מחלקה מפוארת. ובכן, מלאכי בית אריה ניצח גם על כל המחלקות האלה, הוא גם היה מנהל בית הספרים הלאומי במשך שנים, ושקד על הספרים, ועל חוקרים רבים ניתן להגיד שהם כתבו ספרים חשובים, שהם טיפחו תחום מסוים. על מעטים אפשר להגיד את מה שאנחנו יכולים להגיד על חברנו מלאכי בית אריה, שהוא למעשה יצר תחום ודיסציפלינה. זאת היא תרומה שלא תסולא בפז בכל הקשור להכרת התרבות היהודית בימי הביניים. כל מי שנזקק לכתבי יד, כל מי שרוצה לבדוק כתבי יד, ימצא אצל מלאכי בית אריה את המפה, את ההבנה על תולדות כתב היד, על הרקע של כתב היד, על כל מה שמסביבו, שכמובן מסביר גם את תוכנו. אז קודם כל אנחנו שמחים להתכנס כאן, ואני רוצה גם לברך את נורית, שהיא גם שותפה לעבודה, ואני מקווה שבימים הקרובים אנחנו נוכל כאן לחגוג את הופעתו של הכרך השלישי של הסופות, ויושבים כאן גם נציגי המחלקה של ההוצאה לאור של האקדמיה, שמשקיעות הרבה עבודה במפעל היקר הזה, שהוא מביא גם כבוד רב לאקדמיה. כלומר, זה מפעל שאם שואלים מה עושה האקדמיה, זה יהיה אחד הדברים הראשונים שאנחנו אולי נעלה במחשבה כדי להצדיק את קיומה של האקדמיה, של מדור למדעי הרוח באקדמיה. ובכן, אנחנו שמחים כאן איתך, ואנחנו נשמע כאן הרצאות של אנשים שלמדו הרבה מאוד ממך, ונזקקים ביום המחקרי במה שאתה נתת, ואנחנו מאחלים לך כאן הרבה מאוד שנים, עד 120, אמרו לי שלפי כל מיני מחקרים, אפשר לומר שכבר נולד האדם שיחיה עד 135. אז אין גבול, ואנחנו מאחלים לך הרבה נחת רוח, בריאות, ושתמשיך ליהנות ממה שאתה עושה. I'm very pleased and honored to introduce our first speaker, Professor Dr. Michael Friedrich from the Asian Africa Institute Universität Hamburg, who is a friend and colleague of Professor Betarier, and is a great expert in sinology, Japanology, in Codicology, and he studied at the University of Freiburg, at the University of Munich, and has been visiting professor in many other institutes. Professor Friedrich asked me to be very short and brief, to give him more time to deliver his lecture. So please, Professor Friedrich, we are very grateful to you for coming here to this event in honor of Malachi Betarier. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. גבירותיי ורבותיי, מלאכי היקר. כבוד גדול לי, רבה מגרמניה, לדבר היום על אחד החוקרים הגדולים במדעי כתבי היד שמלאו אמונים להולדתו. אני מודה לכם ולכל השותפים מעומק ליבי על הכבוד הזה. מניח אני שאתם לא חולקים לי אישית את הכבוד הזה, אלא לנציג של המכון למחקר תרבויות כתבי היד הקיים באוניברסיטת המבורג. פרופסור בית אריה היה אצלנו כבר מספר פעמים, הן כחוקר אורח והן כמרצה. ואני שמח שהוא יחד עם אשתו היקרה נורית וחברות לעבודה אחרות. יארגן וילמד אצלנו בהמבורג סמינר קיץ בספטמבר הבא. כבר עכשיו אני מצפה בכיליון עיניים לפגוש שוב האדם הנפלא ואיש המדע המצוין מלאכי. I will switch to English now. And beg your pardon for not being conversant in your beautiful language. To talk about codicology in the presence of Malachi Beit Aryeh is more than a challenge. Let me start with a closing paragraph of a wonderful book published 25 years ago. Immersed as we are in the particularities of each script and history of book production, we should embark on a quest for a general or universal grammar of the codex. We should explore the common structural elements, the technical and aesthetical topoi, economic and social conditionings, functional and semiotic configurations of texts and iconography of layout, which permeate the making of the codex in all the cultures in which the codex performed the magnificent role of propagating texts and knowledge, preserving cultural continuity, introducing new ideas, and inspiring intellectual and social changes. witnessing the paradoxical and dialectic process of unification and dismantling in our own time, of course not referring to this one, but 25 years ago, both the tremendous prospects of overcoming political, racial, and cultural barriers and menacing national and ethnic fragmentation, historians of the book can humbly contribute to the universality of humankind by promoting a merged transcultural of convergent discipline of convergent codicology and add further common structure and texture to cultural multiplicity. End of quote. What else is there to say? Not very much, of course. In what follows, I will thus not try to carry coals to Newcastle or to climb on your shoulders, but instead add 3 footnotes, adducing evidence mainly, but not exclusively, from non-codex cultures, and doing this in a more or less systematic manner. I'm neither a full-fledged codicologist nor an expert in one of the codex cultures, but a trained sinologist, so I'm mainly dealing with things Chinese. My knowledge concerning manuscript cultures beyond the Chinese cultural sphere is limited, and I will to a large extent rely on what I've learned from the many colleagues of more of 20 disciplines at our center in Hamburg and those involved in our project of an encyclopedia of manuscript cultures in Asia and Africa, of which Professor Beit-Arieh is a member, of course. But first, it may be helpful to remind ourselves why we studied manuscripts. Whether historians or philologists, most of us are interested in the contents manuscripts provide, while the codicologists, and some other scholars as well, of course, investigate the material object, sometimes misleadingly called container, so as if you have a content which you can take out of a container and then put it somewhere else. The latter, the artifact contains a wealth of information beyond its content, some visible, such as layout or decoration, for example, some hidden, the chemical composition of pigments, the fibers of paper, or palimpsested writing. The latter, the hidden factors, is researched by material science, which has become part and parcel of advanced codicology. And codicology has long ago left behind its former status as an ancillary discipline. It's on its way to become an evidence-based field with systematic and historical ambitions. 2 brief examples why manuscripts play a role, even if there are printed editions on the table. One for the intellectual historian, one for the philologist. I don't have to introduce this person to you who has become the so-called initiator or head of the so-called Cambridge School of the History of Political Ideas. His interest in a new approach to the history of political ideas obviously was triggered by the addition of Lazaret of the 2 treatises of government of John Locke. And even though the manuscripts are lost, it was clear and has been mainly, as far as I know, confirmed in ongoing research afterwards, that the manuscripts of these treatises had been written 10 years before they were first published, 1689 and 1690. And that would mean that the formal reading as a justification of the revolution in 1688 would have been impossible, because they were conceived and written many years before. That's for the intellectual historians, and now one which is a bit more from my field, and sometimes I will have to beg your pardon. I will confront you with a few things which maybe are not the bread which you eat every day. What you see here are photos of parts of 2 silk manuscripts which were unearthed in 1973 from a tomb in the southern province, Chinese province of Hunan at Mawangdui. The tomb was closed in 168 BCE, so more than 2,000 years ago. The manuscripts must therefore predate this event, but it's far from clear how long. Both of them are so-called multiple text manuscripts. That means they carry more than one text. Both have the Both have the Taoist classic Lao Tzu, which some of you may know. For this reason, the manuscripts were titled Lao Tzu A and Lao Tzu B by the editors. There are hundreds of articles discussing variants and other philological questions, paleographical problems, matters of textual transmission and the genesis of the received Lao Tzu text, but only very few looking at the manuscripts as such, as codicological units. Let us therefore forget for a moment that we would like to know what is written there and first examine how it is written. And I've listed here a few properties which make immediately clear that the relationship between these two manuscripts is rather special. In the size, you have 1 foot against 2 feet, you have one rolled, it was rolled when it was found in the tomb, the other one was folded, you have one which have marks, one has marks above the frame here, the other one has marks, excuse me. No, this is techniques, yeah, I think you can see it. And the other one has marks below the frame for dividing text. Oh, that is different from what I have on my screen here. I'm very sorry. Well, I think I continue talking, maybe we find someone who can fix this. I think you have seen enough. These two manuscripts, obviously, in every aspect, were conceived as mirroring images. And, of course, this will have some consequences for our understanding. I will not go into details here concerning the content. Actually, they are two independent political statements. One was the first one, and the other one is answering towards the other one. So before even having read the content, you already can see from the pure codicological features that there is something which relates these two manuscripts, besides both of them being found in the same tomb. There is another feature, and then I'll stop with this one, that scholars who have been discussing these texts have been discussing the variants, of course, of the text. And there is one variant, this is hardcore for you, there is one variant which is found in one of the Lao Tzu texts and which has been used to reconstruct the history of the Lao Tzu text differently. But if you look at the whole manuscript, it's a multiple text manuscript, as I told you. There is another text. There is another text. Now let's try again. Yeah, these are the marks, and thank you very much. There is another text which has in a place where we would accept the same word as in the Lao Tzu, which has exactly the same variant. And that means that what the textual scholar has considered to be a variant of the text actually is something, probably a scribal habit, which is not directly related to the text. And that means also that if we have this type of manuscript, we would have to look at all texts of the manuscript and not only on one, which of course holds true not only for Chinese ones, as we know. So these were preliminary remarks. Now I will add my footnotes, and these footnotes will contain lots of material which I will just briefly introduce. I will comment first indirectly on the first sentence of this statement. Immersed as we are in the particularities of each script and history of book production, we should embark on a quest for a general or universal grammar of the codex. So the codex, of course, traditionally is considered to be the book of the major cultural areas, geographical areas surrounding more or less the Mediterranean. But as you will see, the codex has been in use for quite a long time in other parts of the world as well. What you see here is a very simple structured codex, of course, but it is one, I would say. And this one was found in Central Asia, roughly dates from the 8th or 9th century. And it probably resulted from cultural context with the West. That is very probable because we do not have any other evidence for the codex in this area before that date and in other areas. But if we continue, and now I jump roughly 1,200 years, I apologize for the poor quality of the image. I would have to talk to the Bavarian State Library to get a better one. You see from the outer appearance, they look very similar. And actually, it's exactly the same book type. But it's not coming from Central Asia now, but from Southwest China. It was used by a minority people far away from these cultural centers where they did printing and other things, and they were still producing the books in the same way which they did in medieval times in Central Asia. And I think this feature has not been much studied, but it would be worthwhile to look into certain traits which have survived, let's say, certain types of modernization in China and have survived in more marginal areas. Let's have another look. The codex, of course, this looks very familiar to you at first glance. The codex is a complex structure, probably the most complex book structure humankind has invented. But when you look at this specimen and you look closer, you will find that it is not a codex. Some people might not even call it a book. It's a loose leaf collection, and it stems from Western Africa, where not all, but most of the books are loose leaf books. They're kept together in a folder like this one, which resembles, of course, Islamic book tradition, but sometimes more important, more valued, higher status books, they're kept in a box. For example, the Qur'ans, and they are nicely decorated, and so you could say in a intercultural, transcultural endeavor that the binding of codicological units might consist of rather interesting elements, a box or a folder like this. And that these are books and not just accidental collections of loose leaves is very clear. The pages are, there is pagination, and it's very clear that you have longer tractates and things in one unit. I will not go into all the consequences of that. Let's yet look at something else. Now we are leaving the codex area. What you see here is a Tibetan loose leaf book. And its loose leaves, they have lots of devices to ensure the order. It's pagination, foliation, they do have both. They have catchwords and lots of other things, titles and very complicated systems. These leaves are kept together only by very heavy covers, wooden covers. And this actually is very good. If it burns, the fire only gets at the edges. Sometimes these are, they have many different formats. Sometimes these are bound together so that they do not get spread. And what you sometimes see also, especially with Buddhist sutras, the loose leaves are wrapped in cloth and then put in between two wooden covers. That, of course, is imitating the Poti book of the Indian tradition, palm leaf books, which were not loose leaf, but loose. You see the holes here, and they had strings to keep them together. These strings sometimes rotted so that you have Indian books without strings, but basically the idea was to have at least one string. For longer ones, you would have two strings. So we have quite a few things which somehow relate to the codex books, but you get away from it more and more. But this is something to be discussed, of course. Everybody calls this books, even though it looks different. This is again something special for our honored Malachi, in a completely different book format, that is the bamboo scroll made up from bamboo slips. We have something which is comparable to quires, which was only found out very recently. You can, this is what you have seen here, there are many codicological units bound together, and you see on this image how they were joined. So the codicological unit is bound together by strings, and then you can put another one, bind it together, and they usually do not exceed 1 meter or so. Usually, there are longer ones. And so we have these bamboo books, which is which is the interesting thing here. This one has, I think, roughly 100 slips. They were bound together. You see it very clearly. These strings usually decay. And when you turn it around, you have on the other side marks. You see them from top left to right. And what a Chinese scholar found out just a few years ago, that these marks were put on the bamboo can. So one calm, they marked it and then sliced it into the different units, so that you have actually a certain number of bamboo calms spread out, written on, bound together. But what's the real interesting thing is, you have 8 of these bamboo calm sets. One is only in the beginning, but you have 44 textual units here. They're very short. Now, if you put this on top of each other, you have 5 blocks. This is according to the terminology of Gumbert, and that means that you have 5 units where textual boundaries and codicological boundaries go together, and that again means that we do not have any means to confirm that this is the order in which it was already originally produced. I won't say any more. This is something which T. Stark has done, very fascinated. So one could talk in a certain sense, and then I will come to my footnote 2, which will be shorter, and then to footnote 3, which will be even shorter. So we could talk in a certain sense about the semantics of the manuscript, and I'm not talking about the content. I'm only talking about the material features. This is very clear, you know all that, but new technologies and an eye to other types of books than the codex only would lead us to, let's say, certainly to do adjustments in certain parts. One thing more, just to show you what material things can mean. What you see here, again, I apologize for the poor quality of the image. What you see here is a manuscript which was produced only a few years ago in Sipsong Bana, which was formerly an independent kingdom in what is now Chinese Yunnan province. The People's Republic of China integrated this former kingdom of a Dailyu-speaking group into its state and modernized not only their way of living, but also the complex Dhamma script they used to use, and thereby more or less wiping out traditional manuscript culture. After the so-called Cultural Revolution, members of the old generations who still knew this Dhamma script started to produce manuscripts again, in which they transmit, among others, their traditional chronicles. They produce these manuscripts until the present day, and this, of course, is a statement. It's a material statement only, paleographical and codicological, but I think the message is clear. So, a manuscript may be considered as a complex material object, you know all that, with 2 different layers of meaning, material and graphic. The choice of material features constitutes a first level, while while the text or the content as materialized in this layer constitutes a second one. Using a Saussurean metaphor, which was coined by Tennyson, as you will know, one may say that both are inseparably weld together like the 2 sides of a sheet of paper, or signifiant et signifié. The relationship in this case, however, being an extremely complex one between 2 complete different sets of signs. In a certain sense, in this type of artifact, mind and matter meet in a very unique way. Now, footnote 2, shorter, as I promised. This footnote relates to the configurations of text and iconography of layout. I will just show you a few things here. Usually, when we do codicology or work with manuscripts, we are interested in the text. We know there are a few colleagues from the artistry department which are interested in some other things, but sometimes it's difficult to decide in whose responsibility this is. These are 3 different examples of the so-called Biblia Pauperum, and there are many, many more, where the content is only defined by family resemblance. There is not one model which was copied. It was practically redesigned in every manuscript we have. There are many dozens of them. So you have one where you have more text than images, then you have another one where you have more images than text, and the very complex structure of images and of content, textual content at the same time, is displayed quite differently in each and every aspect. So it might help not only to talk about text, but also to maybe broaden it a bit and include images, diagrams, and other things. Another example is, and this is from the Islamic world, the 3 different types of manuscripts of the Qasidat al-Burda, which you probably know, the story of al-Busiri. When he was struck by paralysis, Muhammad appeared to him and wrapped him in a mantle, Burda, so that's the name of this poem, and when he awoke, he could walk again. According to the research of Friedrich, the different book forms correspond to different uses of the manuscripts. Type 1 arranges the text in a block without further differentiation. Type 2 clearly divides the half verses by a blank space, sometimes adding even elements such as frames, separation marks, or subtitles. Type 3 finally is usually small-sized and gives only 1 half verse per line. These three types probably correspond to three types of use. Type 1 was in use until the 16th century and probably meant for transmission of the text and its history, since in many of the manuscripts an account of its history is prefaced to the poem. Type 2, by clearly marking the half verses, since the 16th century seems to have served other purposes, such as reading or edifying. And this type of layout was already in use since the 11th century, so it means something that it started to be used only later. And type 3 became popular only in the 18th century. Manuscripts of this times are more or less pocketbooks and were probably carried because of their healing and apotropaic effects. So very briefly, a couple of images. Scholars' manuscripts constitute a very special type 2. They are manuscripts with space. The left one is from West Africa again, where you have left ample space to write in there. The middle one is a Greek one from the 11th century, where the scholars have filled in, stricken out. And the third one is from the around 1600 from China. Ritual manuscripts, doesn't matter where they are from here, are completely different. You usually have some hints for action, because ritual is performance, but very rarely comments or notes or things like that in these traditions. And finally, when we are talking about use, here again you have the matter and the use. This is one of the great scholars who died a few years ago from Laos. He's doing a public recitation of a Buddhist sutra, and he's always doing this from a bamboo manuscript, not of a printed version or of a paper version or so. Bamboo, palm leaf manuscript. They are produced there until the present day. And these recitations and these practices are meant for merit making. When you spread the word of the Buddha, you receive religious merit, which you can transfer to other living beings. And this beautiful manuscript of the 9th century, which contains the text of a Chinese Buddhist sutra, was probably never used. The pure act of copying a manuscript and producing a manuscript serves as for gaining religious merit. And they were probably afterwards stored at a monastery. So, one last thing here. We usually consider the manuscript as lots of two-dimensional faces, but manuscripts are three-dimensional objects, and so one might talk about the architecture of manuscripts, which is very clearly here. And this, of course, is not a manuscript. It's huge. It's not a manuscript which you would take on a journey for reading. It's a luxurious copy of a Buddhist sutra, and these are usually not read or recited. They are taken out once a year and processed through the locality and then stored back. So one might call this all these aspects pragmatic of the manuscript. So footnote 3, and then I'm coming to the close. The transcultural discipline of convergent codicology. I take this with the liberty of interpretation to mean that it is not only meant as the codicology of the codex, but the codicology of the manuscript book. And I hope that we will see further progress here. I can only offer a very simple thing here now. According to a schema we devised after what Raymond Williams had done on completely different things in the 50s, I will talk about the patterns. Of course, production and use is clear. The settings would be the socio-economic hardware which produces manuscripts or is responsible for it, institutions, money, and the patterns would be the software, the cultural things. And I would like to show you one nice example. We have different cultural traditions which use columns to display text. And the one you see here to the right is for the Latin Greek world, the usual way. You read the first column, then you read the second column. But if you turn to another tradition, it looks different. What you see on top is a palm leaf manuscript, and it's Sanskrit. It's also written from left to right, but you read it as a line. And the columns here are probably serving aesthetic or other functions, but they are not meant to be read one by one, which is of course different from the from the Arabic manuscript you have here, where you have the verses which are divided, but again you have to read it in two. So I come to a conclusion, and thank you for your patience. Of course, there are many, many tasks. I'm not talking about all what we have on the table under the topic of digital humanities now, because these are, of course, only part of the larger endeavor. What we would need, according to my humble opinion, is a general and comparative codicology of all types of manuscripts, past and present, building on the achievements of the codicology of the Codex. There is no scientific research with this depth on any others. For Indian, it has just started. For many, many others, there is almost nothing. And of course, one would have to modify quite a few things, but building on this very high developed discipline, I think there is much we can learn and do. We would need, in order to access all the materials, we would need standards for cataloging, not only for, let's say, Hebrew manuscripts or Arabic manuscripts or whatsoever, but for cataloging manuscripts as artifacts in general. And that would mean comprehensively describing all types, past and present again, including as much information as possible. And actually, it's needless to say, but I would say that Svardata, which all of you know, has done a marvelous job and is a model which should be and could be emulated. Finally, scholars, philologists sometimes say they edit a manuscript. Strictly speaking, they do not edit a manuscript, but they edit a text. And maybe with the new technological means we have at hand now, it would make sense to start thinking about a manuscript edition, which would include all the material factors, images, of course, and if possible, material analysis of the pigments and others as well. These are just a few thoughts in honor of one of the major scholars of our days. And so the only thing one should and could end with is what I already read out. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Professor Friedrich, for sharing with us your amazing knowledge in codicology. I am sure that there will probably be a few questions from the audience. Yes? Please, Professor Sira.
May I add that all the paleographical project was in association with France. I mean, Malachi is certainly someone marvelous, but all the work was done with the scientific research and the academy. Professor Scholem was the first, was the president at this time. But I mean, everything began in the 17th century with Mabillon. And the Hebrew paleography is the daughter of the Latin paleography, which is very, very old and had a lot of marvelous scholars. And we had the chance to have in France a comité de paléographie where the best Latin and Greek paleographers helped us to work. So I think that this should have been said, because this is only the truth.
May I respond? Of course. As I remarked at the end.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Sira. Of course, I could have spent the 30 minutes which were given to me in giving you the big names before Malachi and contemporary scholars and even younger scholars, but I think that was not the purpose of the talk.
And just mention them.
Yes, and Mabillon, of course, is of extreme importance, and if I come to my field, but I will spare you this, I could even go back for 2,000 years where we had the first philologist who did critical work on things, and our Chinese colleagues are still building on him, and so please forgive me. I've heard the name of Mabillon, and I know that, of course, even giants sometimes stand on the shoulders of other giants, but that's the way how scholarship works. So forgive me for not mentioning any names. It would really have been too much, I'm afraid.